Hey there, members of the Night Crew, and folks who just love horror. Welcome to the Night Crew podcast, where shadows breathe and monsters listen. This is the podcast where we get cozy with the creepy, the frightening, and the just plain undead. I'm your host, Brad Ricks. Before we get into tonight's nightmare, a couple of quick updates. First, I'm back from all the traveling. Had an amazing time at Scares That Care and AuthorCon 6 in Williamsburg and at Big Texas Terror in San Antonio. If you get a chance next year to go to either of them, do it. Also, Night Crew 3 Hunting Ground is on its way. The edits are done, and I've seen the first draft of the cover. Oh, it's good. Stay tuned for more on that. In the meantime, if you haven't grabbed a Night Crew podcast t-shirt yet, what are you waiting for? Head over to bradricks.com and pick one up. You can also grab signed copies of any of my novels while you're there. Of course, the link is in the show notes, but it's also easy. bradricks.com. All right, now that the housekeeping is out of the way, let's talk about something that really makes the werewolf look like a golden retriever. We've been living in werewolf country for, a few episodes now. The history, some psychology, that Hollywood fur budget. But tonight, we're going to stay in that same dark woods, but we're going to push a little deeper in, past the edge of the map, past the part where legends are comfortable. Tonight, we're talking about skinwalkers. If you've spent any time on late night internet rabbit holes, and I know you have because, you're listening to me. You've probably heard the word. Maybe you've seen the creepypastas, the Reddit threads, the stories from people who swear something followed their car through the desert. But here's the thing. Skinwalkers are not a Hollywood creation. They are not a campfire story somebody made up for fun. They come from a very real, very sacred place. And tonight, we're going to treat them that way. So, lock the door, keep your eyes off the tree line, and let's get into it. Before we go any further, I want to address something directly. The Skinwalker, or Naaldlooshii in Navajo, which translates roughly to, with it, he goes on all fours, is a figure rooted in Navajo spiritual tradition. And within that tradition, even speaking about skinwalkers openly is considered dangerous and taboo. There are Navajo people who will tell you that discussing this topic invites bad things. I respect that completely. What I'm doing tonight is approaching this from the outside, through the lens of folklore, history, and the way these legends have rippled out into broader American culture. I'm not here to decode sacred ceremony or claim any kind of inside knowledge. I'm a horror author from Texas talking about scary things. So we'll keep this respectful and then we'll keep moving. So, what actually is a skinwalker? In the broadest strokes, a skinwalker is a person, a human being, who has gained the ability to transform into any animal they choose. Dog, coyote, wolf, crow, bear. They do it by wearing the skin of that animal, hence the name. And the power doesn't come cheap. According to the tradition, acquiring this ability requires a serious moral transgression, the worst kind. The kind that permanently separates you from your community, your family, your humanity. This is not a bite. This is not a curse passed on by a stranger in the woods. This is a choice. A deliberate crossing of a line that cannot be uncrossed. That's what makes the skinwalker different from almost every other shape-shifting legend that we've talked about. The werewolf is usually a victim. It's tragic, reluctant. The skinwalker, though, sought this out. They are typically described as incredibly fast, faster than any vehicle on the road, able to mimic voices, human voices, the voice of someone you love. They can knock on your window, call your name from the darkness, and if you look directly into their eyes, some stories say they can enter you and take over your body. Like basically the world's worst house guest. Physically, witnesses describe them as wrong. Not just scary, but like I said, like wrong. An animal that moves too much like a human. A human that moves too much like an animal. That uncanny valley feeling cranked up to 11 and then set on fire. People who've reported encounters, and there are a lot of them, particularly in the American Southwest, describe a deep instinctive revulsion, not just fear. It's something older than fear. Now, the Skinwalker legend is most strongly associated with the Navajo Nation, which covers a massive stretch of the American Southwest, parts of Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, but shape-shifting witch figures appear in the traditions of other indigenous nations too. The Hopi, the Ute, the Pueblo peoples all have their own versions of the corrupted individual who uses dark knowledge to transform. The specific details vary, but the core fear is the same. Someone among us has become something other. That's an ancient, universal human fear, by the way. The idea that evil doesn't just come from outside, it wears a familiar face. That the monster might be your neighbor, your healer, somebody who smiled at you last Tuesday. The geography plays a role too. The Southwest is extraordinary and desolate in equal measure. Vast stretches of high desert where the horizon goes on forever and the night sky is absolute. Out there, sounds carry strangely. Shadows move in ways your brain wasn't built for. It's not hard to understand why this terrain became the breeding ground for stories of things that shouldn't exist. The land itself feels like it's watching you, and sometimes, apparently, something is. Now, let's talk about the place that put the Skinwalker on the mainstream map, Skinwalker Ranch. Located in the Uinta Basin of northeastern Utah, this roughly 500-acre property has become arguably the most famous allegedly haunted piece of real estate in America. And the stories coming out of it read like someone stapled 5 different horror movies together and said, hey, sure, why not? UFOs, cattle mutilations, poltergeist activity, orbs, invisible creatures that leave physical traces, apparitions, and yes, large unidentifiable animals that behave in deeply unsettling ways. The ranch gained national attention in the 1990s when journalist George Knapp, he's the same guy who broke the Bob Lazar UFO story, so he's no stranger to, weird. He published a series of reports about a family called the Shermans who had purchased the property and experienced what they described as a sustained campaign of paranormal terror. Now, they eventually sold the ranch, because of course, to a Las Vegas businessman named Robert Bigelow, who he funded a private scientific investigation of the property through an organization called NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery Science. Scientists, ex-military personnel, and investigators spent years on site trying to capture evidence of whatever was happening there. They reported strange things. They also reported that whatever was there seemed to know it was being watched and adjusted accordingly, which is the kind of detail that really makes you want to sleep with the lights on. The ranch has since changed hands again, and is now the subject of a History Channel series called The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, which, depending on your tolerance for like slow burn reality TV, it's either fascinating or deeply frustrating, probably both. There are drills and ground penetrating radar, and a lot of people standing around looking concerned while unusual readings spike on equipment. And the jury is still very much out. Whether you believe the ranch is a genuine hotspot of paranormal activity or the world's most elaborate cattle country ghost story, it did something important for the Skinwalker legend. It moved it off the reservation, figuratively speaking, and into the national conversation. Suddenly, people who had never set foot in the Southwest were Googling Naaldlooshii at 2 in the morning, which, hey, fun fact, is probably exactly when you shouldn't be doing that, and when I was doing that. Now, let's talk about the stories, because when it comes to skinwalkers, the encounter reports are where things get genuinely unsettling. You can find hundreds of first-person accounts online, Reddit forums, paranormal websites, YouTube testimonials. A lot of them come from Native individuals who grew up near the Navajo Nation. A lot of them come from truck drivers, night shift workers, people traveling through the Southwest after dark. The details vary, but certain things repeat, and repetition in folklore is worth paying attention to. I'm going to go through a list. So first, the running vehicle. This one shows up constantly. Someone is driving a rural road at night when something appears alongside the car. Not in front of it, alongside it, keeping pace at 60, 70 miles an hour, moving on all fours, but somehow matching highway speeds. That's the detail that gets people, because even the fastest land animals, they top out, especially for consistent running, well below that. But that's what these witnesses are describing. Next, the voice mimicry. This is the one that haunts me personally. The idea that you're camping or sitting outside and you hear someone calling your name in a voice you recognize, someone you love. And the rule, passed down through generations, is don't answer. Don't go toward the voice. Because what's waiting at the edge of the firelight isn't who you think it is. If you did not go camping with your grandmother and yet you're hearing her voice just, beyond the trees, I guarantee you it's not her. But even then, that specific fear, of something that knows your name and knows who you love is primal in a way that really no monster movie really can quite capture. Next, the eyes. Witnesses almost always mention the eyes. Reflecting light like an animal's, but at the wrong height. Too tall, standing upright, but moving wrong. One account I came across described it as watching a person try to imitate a wolf, or a wolf try to imitate a person, and failing at both simultaneously. That image has been living in my brain rent-free ever since, and I guarantee you will end up in one of my novels at some point. Now, are all these accounts true? I'm a horror writer. I am not a cryptozoologist, although I still think that career sounds so awesome. So I really can't say. What I can say is that the consistency across thousands of independent reports, across different states, different decades, different demographics, it's hard to completely dismiss. Either something real is happening out there in the dark desert, or human beings have a deeply shared anxiety about this specific kind of wrongness. And honestly, both of those options keep me up at night. Now, since we've been living in werewolf territory lately, let's draw the comparison directly. Because these things look similar on the surface and are very different underneath. The past couple episodes have been kind of werewolf adjacent. So that's why I did Skinwalkers. So the werewolf, in most of its mythology, is a victim. Larry Talbot didn't ask to be bitten. David Kessler in American Werewolf didn't want any of this. Scott Howard in Teen Wolf, okay, he eventually loved it, but he came around. The point is, the werewolf transformation is something that happens to a person. The beast is external, an invader. The horror is loss of control. The Skinwalker is the opposite. The transformation is intentional. This power was sought. The line was crossed on purpose, which means the horror isn't about losing control. It's about what a person is willing to do to gain it. That's a far darker premise. It's significantly darker because it means the monster was always in there, just waiting for the right price. The werewolf is also, by design, kind of temporary. The sun comes up, the full moon sets, the curse lifts. There's a morning after. There's a chance at redemption, or at least an interruption. The Skinwalker has no such out. Once you've crossed that threshold, you're on the other side permanently. The wolf pelt comes off. What you've become doesn't. And here's the difference that really sticks with me. The werewolf, even at its most terrifying, is sympathetic. We feel for it. That's the whole point of the mythology, the tragedy of the beast. At the end of Monster Squad, for instance, when the boys finally kill the werewolf, the first thing he says as he's dying is, "Thank you." The Skinwalker is not sympathetic. It doesn't want your empathy. It wants your name, your voice, and your face. And if the legends are right, it knows exactly how to get them. So why does this legend keep growing? Why is a figure from Navajo tradition now a global internet phenomenon, spawning Reddit threads and documentary series and more creepypastas than I could read in a year? Part of it is the internet, obviously. The late night algorithm has a lot to answer for. But I think there's something deeper. The Skinwalker touches a specific fear that most monsters don't bother with. The fear of the familiar made wrong. The fear of something you trust having become something you can't trust. The face that's almost right. The voice that's almost right. Almost. We spend a lot of time in horror talking about things that come from outside. The monster in the woods, the creature from the deep, the alien in the dark. But the legends that really get under your skin, the ones that stick, are always about something closer, something that used to be one of us. And the Skinwalker is that in its purest form. There's also the geographical element. The American Southwest is one of the last genuinely wild, genuinely dark places in the continental United States. Out in the Navajo Nation, or the Uinta Basin, or the high desert of New Mexico, the sky is big and the darkness is complete, and your headlights only cut so far. A lot of monster mythology lives in civilized landscapes, small towns, foggy English moors, Carpathian castles. The Skinwalker lives somewhere that civilization hasn't entirely tamed. That makes it feel realer, more plausible, like it actually has room to exist. And maybe that's the real legacy of this legend. Not the TV shows or the memes or the merchandise, but the reminder that there are still places on this continent where the old fears have never quite been extinguished, where the dark between the trees is genuinely dark, where something could be out there, and it would know your name. That's it for the Night Crew podcast and our look at the Skinwalker. Ancient, intentional, and wearing a face you recognize. We've covered a lot of dark ground in this little werewolf adjacent series. The history, the psychology, again, that Hollywood fur budget, and now a legend that predates all of it. I hope you've enjoyed this run. I think I have one more episode I'm going to do like this before, hey, let's jump into another creature. And if any of this has given you second thoughts about driving through the Southwest after midnight, well, you're welcome. If you've enjoyed tonight's episode, do me a favor, hit subscribe, leave a rating, and share this with a fellow creature of the night. If you rate it 5 stars, please. The monsters have spoken. If you want updates on my writing, you can follow me on Facebook or TikTok at Bradrick's Author. You can find my novels wherever books are sold, but head over to bradricks.com for some signed copies, some good Night Crew podcast t-shirts, and other merch, and sign up for my newsletter. Night Crew 3 Hunting Ground is coming, and trust me, you want to be on that list when it drops. I'm Bradricks, reminding you to stay out of graveyards after dark, question people who don't show up in mirrors, and if you're driving through the desert at night and something pulls up alongside you at 70 miles an hour, don't look at the eyes, just drive. Until next time, keep your curtains drawn, your sense of humor sharp, and your blood inside your body. Thanks for listening.